think looking to your core values will help you with your goals. And if you don't know what they are, I suggest looking them.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Shafer on Talks with Dr. Shafer. I'm a physician, life coach, mom, musician, and author, and I am passionate about using storytelling as a tool to help reclaim your story and reframe it so you can build the most beautiful future possible. And I am so fortunate today to have Donna Galanti here with me. Thank you so much for being with us on the show. She is an author and she is an inspirational force. And we are so glad to have her here to support her and her new podcast, Your Bounce Back Life.
Oh my gosh,
Hi,
Schaefer,
Donna.
thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I'm so excited to be here and just be around your vibrant energy. So thank you
Oh,
for having me.
thank you. Well, honestly, so life coaches, we kind of operate around words, and they, like, when you are interacting with someone, a word will pop up. And when I was preparing for us meeting one another, that's exactly the word that just kept on coming into my mind, just energy, energy, energy. And I just love your energy.
Thank you.
And I'm so grateful to have come across your podcast, Your Bounce Back Life. And by the way, as soon as anyone who's listening to this podcast is done, please go listen to Donna's. Where can they go listen to that, Donna?
So my website, Your Bounce Back Life, has all the platforms, but it's also on Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, a multiple of platforms. So you can just look it up by name and find it there.
That's awesome. And I do love actually how the episodes are embedded in your website, and it's really easy to listen and enjoy. So yeah, go to Donna's website and enjoy them because they are very, very inspirational. So Donna, please, I'm so excited to have you share your story. So tell us what you've been going through the last few years that inspired you to get to this point to start this podcast.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I'll try to put that into like a full story, right? Beginning, middle, and end as brief as I can because it's very complex, like many of our stories are. I'm a storyteller. I love story. I think we need story to understand ourselves and the world around us. You know, stories are what are passed down so that we can understand the world around us and look to ourselves as our own characters to find self-awareness. And so really my journey as an author started when my mom passed away, actually 15 years ago this week. And I'd always wanted to be an author. I'd always been a writer, and she'd been my champion. And in her passing, she really left me a gift, a legacy to fulfill that dream. And so I wrote my first book, and I became a published author and went down that whole journey, traditional publishing, hybrid. I've had several literary agents. I have several books out. And I've fallen in love with writing for kids because I love one foot in the magical world of childhood and one foot in the adult world. That's what I love. So I feel like if my mom hadn't passed away, I wouldn't be on this journey as an author and storyteller. It's bittersweet, of course. And with that, I think I've really blossomed in my 50s. I turned 55 in a couple months, and I feel more productive than ever. And I think that journey and taking that step to become an author led to these other journeys. I've started my own online businesses. I've become a public speaker, a presenter at writing conferences in schools. I love doing author visits with young kids and sharing my journey and sharing the craft of writing, the marketing of writing. And so then I turned those into online courses. And so that led to another business. And then eventually in the publishing world recently, it's been a very tight market, very tight to get published, especially traditionally, lots of gatekeepers. And I just thought, I just want to create my content with no gatekeepers and get my voice out there and share my experience and hopefully inspire people and help them on my own. And that's exactly why I started my podcast. And it has been so joyous to do this with no gatekeepers. Nobody's saying no. It's just me,
Yeah.
my own unique voice. And some people will like it and it will resonate with them, and it won't with some people. And that's okay. I'm not for everybody, and I'm okay with that. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's so beautiful. And I think that's really important because if you are for everybody, then you are for no one, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you
That's
are,
true. And And writing stories too is the same way. You really need to know your niche. Who are you speaking to? Who is your audience? Because it isn't for everybody. If you try to get everybody, that's just too wide of a pool. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
When you were starting writing and grappling with this, because it was kind of a very sudden transition from you were writing before, but you weren't publishing, to
Hmm.
writing, when you're going through that process of, okay, who am I and who do I want to present to the world?
Hmm.
How did you go about that process?
Well, I started writing to get through the grief of losing my mother because I needed something to focus on to distract me. And
Mm.
so I would get up at 4:30 in the morning and write for 2 hours every day during the week before I went to my marketing job at the time. And it was this wondrous world, this fictional dream world. And my characters were coming alive every day. I said, I don't know what they're going to do today. It's amazing. It was very magical. Of course, at the time, I knew nothing about storytelling. I knew no other authors. I was in a bubble, right? And
Mm.
after that, I got my first book deal and I really embraced the world of authors and writers and saw what an amazing community it is, very supportive, lots of camaraderie. And and yeah, and actually that book was very cathartic. I started writing dark thrillers for adults, since moved to fantasy for children, but my dark thriller series, the Element Trilogy, is very personal, has a lot of me in it. And a lot of
Mm.
people look at me and they think I'm this bubbly, happy person. And they read these dark books and they're like, wow, like, what's wrong with you? Um,
Oh,
you know,
goodness. Nothing.
but
Nothing.
it was my therapy.
Yeah.
There's a lot of dark things in there that came from my past. It was very healing for me. And now I'm
Hmm.
not in that space anymore where I want to write that dark content. So I'm in a
Hmm.
happier, lighter place. And that really helped me heal with my story. So,
Yeah. Well, I love that. And that's something also that really resonated with me when I was listening to your podcast and I was listening to your episode about wonder,
mhm.
which is so beautiful. I think it's your latest
Oh, yes.
podcast. It was
Yes.
so
Thank you.
beautiful. And it just felt like a warm hug. And I was just so happy when I was listening to it. And the thing that really I related to in it is here is this really warm, just you're taking energy from hearing you speak, from hearing you communicate your story and the message you want to share. And often when we experience people who have that warmth and that kindness that just flows out of them, I think something we believe earlier in life, before we've been around and experienced challenges, we think, gosh, that person must have had the most beautiful, perfect life and childhood and everything was perfect. And
Mhm.
that's why they are the way they are. And I could never be like them because I have challenges. I'm not so fortunate. And the truth is the exact opposite. You earned that perspective and you made a choice about how you want to show up. Do you want to show up in your past story or do you want to build from the lessons you learned from your story? And
Yeah,
that's impactful.
absolutely. And thank you for those kind words about my podcast. It was one of my favorites to do because as a writer, I think wonder fits in with writing and creating and the imagination, of course. And fantasy is my realm, I think, because I can't escape into worlds that I create. And I think wonder is, we can come to that place through adversity. I've had a lot of adversity in my life. A lot of people don't know some of the dark things, from my past that have happened to me, abuse, financial loss, bankruptcy, all kinds of things, that I don't talk about, a lot, especially in public. But those things have I've gotten through, right? They were adverse challenges and I got through them and it made me more resilient. And in getting through them too, I look to wonder every day because we can be going through terrible times, right? Multiple life challenges, and those are awful and they're tough and they're hard, but we can still have beautiful, wonderful things in our life, right? And I think when we're going through life challenges, sometimes, like, I went through caregiving with my dad last year before he passed, and that was like a full-time job. And we can feel like when we're going through these life challenges, it's all consuming, right? Like, oh my gosh, our whole life is awful. But it's not, right? That's just one aspect that, yes, is overtaking our life, and the rest of our life may be on pause. But I found in writing all the wonderful things about my life I had these good things. I had the love of my son, my husband. I had wonderful friends that support and elevate me. I'm able to work for myself, so I don't have to go to an 8 to 5 job anymore. So these were still wonderful things. And I would realize them. I go to nature a lot. And that's kind of where I have my spiritual moments. I actually get very emotional. I'm in the trees and I'm crying. I'm like,
Yeah.
thank you, great creator, for this beautiful world that I get to experience. And that's where I find my gratitude, and I step away from myself and I get outside of my head. And even when
Mhm.
things are awful, bad things are going on. And I realize
Mhm.
this world is a beautiful place and I can still experience joy and love and peace in this moment. Hmm.
That's beautiful. And it's almost like when you're in those moments that are so full of sorrow and challenge, and they really push you into the depths of your soul, then
Hmm.
you can find the depths of your joy.
Absolutely. And I'm the kind of person that I want to relish not the dark moments necessarily, but the pain of life. Like when my mother passed away, I took care of her in her last week. She had cancer, and my dad couldn't face it. He didn't want to see, but I wanted to be there. I was by her bedside. I was bathing her and caring for her because I knew this was a gift. I will never get this moment again. This is my chance to say goodbye to my mother, no matter how painful it is. And I will have that with me always. That was beautiful, beautiful.
A gift for her and a gift for you.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, that is beautiful. I wanted to discuss caretaking with you more because I really appreciated you did an episode on your podcast about caretaking for your father as
Hmm.
well. That was a longer period of time, to my understanding, because of his dementia,
Right.
which resonates with me as a neurologist and having taken care of many patients and kind of walked beside their family during that process as well. And I think it's really important to share the story of what it's like being a caretaker
Hmm.
in that situation and how it impacted your life.
Oh, absolutely. And like you said, it is a long road. It can be, depending on the situation. I moved my dad into assisted living 2.5 years ago. And soon after, he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And I was living a 10-hour car ride away from him. So as he grew increasingly worse, it became a full-time job. I was constantly on the phone during the day with hospice, with his facility, constant trips to the hospital, and social workers, and all of that. And I will say, hospice was amazing. We had a team of, like, I don't know, almost 10 people that would touch base with him during the week. And hospice is not just for people who are in the end stage, right? It's for people who have been diagnosed with a certain condition. So, and you
Mhm.
just get renewed every 6 months. You probably know this. So
Yeah.
they were a wonder themselves in helping me navigate this caregiving process and making decisions for him. And it was a lot because as his dementia grew, he would call me when he was still able to handle the phone and just be very distressed. He had a lot of, what do you want to call it? Like illusions. Like he was living in another world, and most of them were
Mhm.
good and happy. And I wrote them down so I could remember his stories. He thought he was marrying a princess one day and then a queen, and he was in a
Mhm.
movie in his facility and he was so happy. But then there were some dark illusions that he had as well. And so I was constantly driving down there or flying down there. And my life really was on hold. I couldn't work on book projects. I
Mhm.
really couldn't do much of anything else. And I was very anxious. I wasn't sleeping. I was constantly, my gosh, my phone's going to ring in the middle of the night. And I will say, once this period was over, you're still in that survivor mode. Like, I know when I forgot my phone a couple times, I was frantic. But then I was like, oh, I don't have to be 24/7 accessible anymore. I was like, it was this new world. It was a relief and sad at the same time, going through that as well. And then I was also dealing with some neglect in my father's facility. So that was really tough
Mhm.
from afar. Um, and that's a long story I can't get into at the moment, just for some legal
Sure.
issues. But
Sure.
the more eyes you have on your loved one, the better. That's what I can say. And that's what hospice helped me with. My dad's
Mhm.
girlfriend was there. one of the reasons why he didn't want to move close to me, because of his girlfriend. She had his dog. He had friends there. That was a big part of his mental health that he needed.
Yeah.
And the weather was so much better where he was. So he loved to be outside. Here's the thing with caregiving somebody with Alzheimer's. My dad didn't know really what was going on. He didn't know to the extent of what I had to go through to manage his health care, his issues. He was having multiple strokes on top of this, the care at the facility, all of this, his finances. And at one point,
Right.
I became resentful, and I know this may
Mm-hmm.
sound awful, but I was like, I'm putting my life on hold. This is like a full-time job, and he doesn't even appreciate it because he can't understand.
Right.
And after he passed, I had this epiphany that I'm glad he couldn't understand. I'm glad he didn't know what I suffered for him, because that would have added to
Yeah.
his suffering. And just as he cared for me when I was a young child, into youth, even into my adulthood, he still helped me out. Now was my time to help him out and give him this gift that I could care for him at the end and give him a peaceful, loving end, which is what he had. So I found peace with that.
I think that's beautiful. And I really appreciate you sharing that emotional journey
Mm-hmm.
that includes resentment,
Right.
because it does. And I think like anyone who's been a mother understands, when you have very, very young children
Mm-hmm.
and they have very large needs, and you have to shrink yourself down,
Mm-hmm.
because it almost reminds me of, you described his dementia in a way I've never heard someone describe it. And I thought this was really intriguing. You described it as his dementia grew. And I visualized in my head, here's your dad in a room and there's less space for him. He's still there,
Mm-hmm.
but there's less space for him as his dementia grows. But he's still
Right.
there, but there's less space for him.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really interesting because I think it is quite common to visualize a person who's just evaporating and dwindling away.
Right. He became a shadow.
And
He really did become
right.
a shadow.
But
Mhm.
I love this imagery that you as a writer used about, also it's also that his dementia is getting bigger. And I think, he's still there. There's not space for him. And I think that's actually a really beautiful way to consider that. I'd never envisioned, in all of the thousands and thousands of conversations that I've had about dementia, I've never heard it put that way. And I think it's really intriguing. And I'm going to be thinking on that. That's
Oh,
really
I'm glad
interesting.
that resonated with you. And another thing too, and I might have mentioned this in my podcast as well, talking about being in a constant survivor mode, is that I felt guilty too, because I wanted it to all be over. I'm like, I was just an emotional state all the time. Thank goodness I had a good therapist. She really helped me navigate it. And I just wanted it to be over. It was so awful for him and for me. And then I realized, but I don't want my dad to be over. I just want
Yeah.
this situation to be over. I wanted my dad back the way he was. And I have those memories now. And my son and I talk, oh, remember when Grampy visited and we did this and we did that? And my son just bought a little vintage convertible with the help of Grampy's money that he left him. And my dad had a vintage convertible. And I said, Grampy would love knowing you have this. And he would love to be tooling around with you in this car. And that warms my heart thinking about that, right? Of them being
Yeah.
together again.
That's beautiful. And I love that when you go through these challenges and they're really hard and you have these emotions that maybe you wish you didn't have,
Hmm.
resentment, you feel some shame, you feel these things, and you have to learn how to disentangle yourself from them. I call that the messy middle. That's normal. You got to go through it. Like you
Yep.
can't skip it. It's there. And it's a wonderful reminder to tell people that, okay, you're in this messy middle. You may be resentful. You may be angry, and that's
Hmm.
okay, because at the end, when you look back, just like when, if you are a parent and when your kids are little and you're exhausted and you think you're doing
Sure.
everything wrong, you look back at that time and you remember the beautiful moments because they were
Hmm.
there. But all of the caregiving kind of sucked the energy to really appreciate them.
Oh, absolutely. And I think having tools to help you navigate it, you made a great point, Schaefer. You have to go through it. You can't go over
Yeah.
it. You can't go around it. You have to go through it. But if you have tools to help you
Yeah.
navigate, and that's what I've built my entire life, just with the adversity I've been through, Again, I've also dealt with lifelong depression. So I've had to fill my toolbox. That's what I call it, my toolbox, with
Mm-hmm.
techniques. I know when that depression is coming on, which I went through with my dad, caregiving. I look to that toolbox, and I'm trying to teach my son some of these things now because he also had a life crisis last year. He's only 21. He's young. He's got a lot to learn about himself and how to navigate challenges. But my
Mm-hmm.
toolbox includes things like I do transcendental meditation. That really calms
Mm-hmm.
me. I do EFT, emotional freedom technique, which is tapping to send calming signals to your brain. I walk in the woods. I go to nature for my spirituality. And I do yoga. I do yoga now too. And I
Yeah.
exercise as well. And one thing that's interesting is my therapist got me back into journaling. Now, you would think as a writer that I would be doing that. Now, I haven't written a journal in years. I wrote one for the first 10 years
Mm-hmm.
of my son's life to him about events in life and the world
Oh.
going around us. And I stopped. It felt vulnerable. It's vulnerable to journal. You're putting your innermost intimate thoughts on paper, and you don't want anybody to see that. But my
Mm-hmm.
therapist said, I think journaling will help you find answers. And boy, was she right. And what's so funny is when I'm writing my books, I journal about my characters to understand them and learn about them. I'm a character. Why don't I do that for myself? So
Yeah.
I did. And wow, what an amazing tool. Every time I journal, when I was feeling confused or upset or angry or whatever, the answers came. And I highly recommend writing pen and paper with your hands, not on the
Mm-hmm.
computer. This is
Mm-hmm.
something I do as a writer as well. It's a different process. When you're writing hand, pen, and paper, you're slowed down. Your thoughts come out differently versus typing really fast on the computer. And I
Mm-hmm.
always had self-awareness. I always actually found the answers to my questions or solutions.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a powerful tool I think people can benefit from.
I love that, and I really appreciate you offering that as a suggestion. I think, um, and it harkens back to a question I have about, so people often don't journal, they don't meditate, they don't go
Mhm,
out for the walk because they're
mhm,
so busy, stuck in that messy middle, and they're like, I don't have time for that. I've got this to do, but then they just stay in this cycle of feeling resentment and then
mhm.
shaming themselves for feeling anger and resentment, and it just keeps going because they're not leaving space for their feelings. They're not acknowledging and just sitting with them and accepting them and then
Absolutely.
growing.
And I think part of that, because I know some people like this, they ignorance is bliss, as the
Mm,
cliche is. Some people don't seek self-awareness. I think you have to be a little courageous to seek self-awareness, to really look inside and face maybe some hard facts about yourself and some habits you need to
yeah.
change,
Mhm.
and help you figure out a path to change them, whether it's dealing with relationships or life challenges. And so seeking self-awareness is a lifelong theme of mine. And I
Mhm.
think it's something everybody could benefit from, but it's scary. And maybe if people listening out there are like, "Oh, I don't know about that." Start with one technique. Maybe it's that
Mhm.
journal, or
Mhm.
maybe try meditation. I have friends I know who are in a constant state of anxiety or stress, and I've recommended these things so many times, but they just don't want to try them. And so I can't help them unless they want to
Yeah.
help themselves with this. So I just
Right.
have to support them the best I can. Mhm.
Exactly. And I think by you actually being on your podcast, being on this podcast, blogging, you are just giving an example, and I think that's so powerful because I think most of us, when we are in our, if you want to say, unawakened state, which I don't know how I feel about that term, but when you're at the point of your growth journey where it hasn't really started yet, but you are in the curious phase of,
Mhm.
I'm willing to take that risk to make that dive into myself. Often it's not a conversation with another human face to face
Mhm.
that helps encourage you to do that. It's a conversation just listening to someone on a podcast who inspires you, reading a book with a character that inspires you, reading a blog, seeing someone important in your life, or even a stranger do something and thinking, gosh, that was really vulnerable and brave. That that feels good. That doesn't feel bad. It feels good. So I
Oh,
appreciate you doing that.
Absolutely. And you brought up a good point too. I think reading books is another gateway to seeking self-awareness. I read a lot of narrative nonfiction and self-help books, and some of them have helped me on my journey. One of my favorites is Deep Work by Cal Newport. I've read it 3 times and I've taken 35 pages of notes to create my own guide.
Wow.
It's
Yeah.
about in this busy, chaotic, static world, it's really hard to sit and focus when you're a creator or you have a big project to launch, like a business or write a
Mm-hmm.
book. You need big chunks of time to immerse yourself in that, to really give your all to it. And I found I wasn't able to sit for more than 15 minutes at a time. My neurons in my brain had been rewired, and I had to rewire them to do deep work. So his book is
Mm-hmm.
amazing. And also Atomic Habits by James Clear, if you've heard of that
Yes.
book.
Oh,
Yes.
absolutely. I love it.
Oh, wonderful. So,
Yeah.
what really resonated with me from that book that I've implemented actually with creating my podcast is not looking to chase goals, but looking to create goals, yes, but focus more on the systems and the processes of how to get to that goal.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've learned is in doing that, those processes and systems I set up to achieve that goal help me with future goals, right? I now have these new habits in
Mm-hmm.
place, these new systems and processes that support me to do more, right? I don't just get to that
Mm-hmm.
goal and say, okay, now what? I thought this was going to make me happy, but now I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And then you kind of lose the momentum and maybe you lost the weight and then you're like, I'm here, but now I have to maintain it. And then you fall away from that,
Yeah.
so his book was very helpful for me. And that's what I did with this podcast because you had sent to me something about, let's talk about chasing your goals. And boy, that word chase really, I think, triggered something in me for my
Oh,
method of operation because
yeah.
when I get a new goal idea or project idea, I become obsessed. I chase, chase, chase. I work
Mm-hmm.
on that and nothing else. Everything else falls away. I'm in 200%, all the bells and whistles. Let's go, let's
Mm-hmm.
go. And I don't have a balance in my life, And
Ah.
so this time with the podcast of Your Bounce Back Life, I said, I'm not doing that. I'm tackling
Ah.
this slow in baby
Uh-huh.
steps. I'm just doing solo episodes, no guests yet, although I'd love to. Because
Mm-hmm.
as you know, that's a whole other thing with technology and connecting with
Right.
people and coordination. Um, and boy, am I having so much fun. And here's something else I learned with slowing down and not being so obsessed, because there's pros and cons to being obsessed with working on a project. I've learned to really enjoy the process and not just be looking to the destination. The
Mm-hmm.
journey is so enjoyable and so much fun. And wherever I'm going, I'll get there because I'm creating and I'm moving forward and I'm learning and I'm connecting with people, but I don't have to reach this destination like as soon as I can.
Mm-hmm.
So the journey is really as fun as the destination. That's what I'm enjoying.
That's awesome. Well, and I think it really goes back and ties in well to the self-awareness piece because there's a difference between a tangible goal and what the big goal is. Because usually
Mhm.
our goals are like, if you really spend time to peel back the layers of the onion, that goal is actually trying to get you to this less tangible goal of where I want to grow to be in the
Mhm.
next year or 5 years or 10 years or just with my life. What's the legacy I want to leave? And that's the beauty of when you were discussing at the top of the episode how you went from grieving your mother to writing and how that evolved. And then it went here and then it went there and it evolved in this way and that way. And it was just this beautiful momentum, as you said. And that's the beauty of when you make it about growth and you don't make it about small goals. You use the goals of who am I today? What are my habits? I'm a person who, to kind of go back to James Clear's way of living, I'm a
Mhm.
person who does this. And you do that every day. And once that has been really incorporated into the fabric of your being, okay, what is another habit that I want to embody? I'm a person who, and really commit to that. So you have these little goals, but understanding that, if I mess up and I fall short on, my checklist, it's okay because every day I'm investing in future me and becoming and growing to the person I want to be. So
Oh,
that's
yes. I love that too. And
beautiful.
I think looking to your core values will help you with your goals. And if you don't know what they are, I suggest looking them up and seeing which ones resonate with you
Hmm.
for sure. And I think this can help with an identity crisis as well, which was actually my first episode on your bounce back life because it's one I've been through many times. Many people
Hmm.
have, right? Even multiple crises at once with your identity of who you are, where you're going.
Hmm.
And that's an uncomfortable place to be. You're really getting outside your comfort zone. And I love to get outside my comfort zone. That's what I've done in my adulthood. Just for an example, I always wanted to do author school visits. And the first time speaking, and it was to my son's school, like 300 sixth graders. And I thought I was literally going to pass out. Okay. I did. And especially because my son was 12 at the time and said, Mom, whatever you do not be boring. I was like, oh my gosh, pressure, right? I can't be boring. Thank goodness he said I wasn't. Um, and then I fell in love with public speaking, and I never thought I would say that. And one of my favorite
Hmm.
things to do is to go to an auditorium and speak to 350 young readers and writers and inspire them and get their childhood perspective. Again, going back to wonder, the
Yeah.
questions they ask and how they think and helping them create stories in classrooms. It's just a wonderful journey and reconnects you with your imagination as a child, your wonder as a child. And so I love doing that. I do speak to adults as well. I don't get the same reaction from them. The kids think I'm a rock star. Grown-ups, not so much.
Well, I think you're a rock star,
Oh,
personally.
oh,
I
thanks.
do. No, it's amazing. As I started off the episode with, I so appreciate your energy. It's infectious, and I think it is unique. And I am so grateful that you decided to share yourself with people through your podcast, because you are sharing this perspective of, I've gone through a lot and I have infectious energy and I'm joyful and this is challenging and here we are and we're just
Mhm.
going through it. We're going on a growth hunt.
Absolutely. I love that. Yep. We're going through it.
Yep, we're going, can't go under it, can't go over it. We got to go through it.
Well, I
Who
really
wrote
appreciate.
that book? I'm so sorry.
I don't know who did write
I
that
have
book.
to. Oh my gosh, I've mentioned it now and I feel like I need to say it and I don't have their name off the top of my head. That's one of our favorites with the kids in
I
the
was going to
house.
say
So,
it's a children's book. I have it. I used to read it to my
yeah.
son. We're going on a bear hunt, I think, or
Yes,
something like
we're
that.
going
Yes.
on a bear hunt.
And
Exactly. And we
we
use
can't
that.
go around it. We can't go over it. We have to go through it. Yep.
I love it.
That's
No,
why.
it's such a good mantra. It's such a good mantra. And tell us again where we can find your books and your podcast. I just want to remind listeners and viewers so that they know how to find you, because I really want them to find you and
Oh,
to enjoy everything that you're doing.
thank you, Shafer. Yes, they can find my podcast at yourbouncebacklife.com. And as an author, just my name, DonnaGalanti.com. And on there, I have my online courses and my public speaking and all things like that. So, yes, thank you so much for having me on today. Your energy, too. I feel like we're bouncing off each other, right?
No, it's really fun. I do.
Yeah.
I do. And I want to talk to you in the future too.
Mhm.
And, so it's really interesting. My daughter, because she was inspired by me, because again, it goes back to this momentum you talked about. She started her own podcast.
Mhm.
She's a children's literature author.
It's amazing.
And yeah, and she loves doing interviews. She
Mhm.
loves it. And she came off stage of her first TV interview and she said, when can I do that again?
That's amazing. She's on a new journey now. Yes. And
She is.
to be so
Yeah.
young, truly. Wow.
Yeah,
Right.
she's
Mhm.
10. So she said, when
Mhm.
can I do that again? And I said, we kind of spitballed about it. And I said, well, what did you really love about it? And she said, I love that a young author like myself can have a voice. And I really
Mhm.
want to help other young authors have a voice. And so then the conversation morphed into, how can we do that? And I suggested maybe she can do interviews. We could, find her a job doing that. And she said, well, why don't I just do a podcast like you do?
Mhm.
And I loved it. So now her What's Up Young Authors, she's interviewing other young authors, but actually getting to look into your process and your
Mhm.
experience as an author, I think it would be really cool to have mentor authors also talk to them.
I love that idea, and I would be so open to
Yeah.
that, and I am so amazed by her, and you reminded me one thing I tell young readers and writers in my school visits, her age, is that I tell them, "You're actually a better author. You're already an author if you write a book, right? But even if you don't get published, but you're actually a better author than me because your imagination is all young and new and innocent and fresh. You know, mine's bogged down with grocery shopping and paying bills and, laundry and all that yucky grown-up stuff, right? So she's really lucky. Her
I love it.
imagination is wild."
Yes, I love it. Yucky grown up stuff. Yes. But we try to live in the wonder, and we
Mhm.
we do the checklist, we get it done, but you have reminded us to live in a state of wonder, and I am so appreciative of that. So
Oh,
thank
thank
you so
you. And
much.
thanks for
And
having me,
yes.
Schaefer.
Oh, my pleasure. And I hope we can have another conversation in the future. You're so inspirational.
So do I.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
And thank you, everyone at home, for listening in and viewing this episode of Talks with Dr. Shafer. Stay safe, take care, and I'll talk to you soon.